What if I told you an Uber driver figured out how to optimize his profits and retirement simply by renting an electric car instead of owning one? On a recent vacation, I met a fellow retiree who had an unusual spin on this familiar side hustle. Yes, the economics of his approach were eye-opening, but what really stuck with me was the retirement lesson behind it. His story is about intention, optionality, and making deliberate choices that not only improved his bottom line, but also gave him the freedom to walk away, pivot, or change course without any regrets. Since Uber first came on the scene, one of my favorite groups of drivers to meet has always been retirees. People who pick up a few hours a day or a couple days a week just to stay busy. I'll never forget one ride in New York, totally memorable, when a BMW 7 Series pulled up for my Uber ride. Behind the wheel was a well-dressed, confident man in a black turtleneck and a very fancy watch. After a few minutes of conversation, I finally asked the guy, "Hey, this is a pretty nice car and you seem pretty well put together. Why are you driving an Uber?" And he smiled at me and explained that he was actually a retired CEO. He told me that he drove 2 or 3 hours a day, not for the money, but simply to get out of the house and talk to people. It ended up being one of the nicest Uber rides I'd ever had and made me think that someday I might want to pick up a few Uber shifts here and there myself. Anyway, in his case, it clearly wasn't about the money. It was about staying productive and connected to the world. And because so many retirees experiment with Uber in one way or another, I wanted to share the story of a different driver I met on this recent trip. This story really isn't about driving for Uber. It's about the bigger picture of how we design our retirement lives. One simple shift in how you approach a side hustle can change it from a grind that barely covers the cost into something that creates real profit and, more importantly, real freedom. That lesson goes beyond the economics. For anyone in or approaching retirement, it's about structuring your time, money, and choices in a way that keeps you both financially steady and personally fulfilled. Welcome to the Unretired, where you're not done, but you're finally doing what you want. Whether you're building a plan or living it, this is your guide to rethinking, reshaping, and reimagining the next chapter. Not by chance, but by choice. If you like this kind of content, please hit the like and subscribe button. It really helps other people discover the channel. All right, before we dive into the details of this Uber driver's story, let's zoom out for a moment and look at side hustles. So side hustles have always become one of the fastest growing ways that retirees are making retirement work, both financially and emotionally. And it makes sense. With inflation eating into our fixed incomes, with more people living longer than ever, retirement savings often need a boost. A side hustle can provide the extra stream of income while also keeping you engaged and connected to the world. Some retirees drive for Uber or Lyft, just like the guy we're going to talk about today. Others may put an extra bedroom or a vacation home to work on Airbnb, and some might pick up retail shifts at places like Home Depot or Lowe's, while others may dive into tutoring, dog walking, or even seasonal tax prep. And many lean into their careers or passions by doing freelance consulting or coaching. The opportunities are broad, but what really matters is not just what you do for a side hustle, but how you structure it. And this Uber driver's story is a perfect example. Let's rewind to the beginning. Like many drivers, he originally used his own car for Uber. On paper, that sounds like a very straightforward option. You own the car, you pay it off gradually, you cover the insurance, and you pay for gas and maintenance. Whatever's left after Uber takes its cut, it's yours. But here was the stark reality that he ran into. Owning a car to drive for Uber is not really that cheap. It also ties you to commitments that you may not want, like debt, maintenance, and repairs. So let's break it down. Imagine you buy a $40,000 car to use for rideshare driving. Let's say you put $10,000 down. That leaves a $30,000 loan to finance over 6 years or 72 months, which is kind of a common term at this point in history. The monthly payment works out to around $470. After the loan, you have to add $200 a month for insurance, and now you're already pushing $700 a month before the car even moves. Now you got to factor in gas. Driving all day, especially in a city like San Francisco or Chicago, can easily run $400 a month in gas. Then you have to add in another $100 to $150 a month for maintenance and repairs over the course of the life of the car. Things like tires, brakes, oil changes, and the inevitable surprise repair that comes from racking up tens of thousands of miles each year. Suddenly, your total monthly cost to own that car as an Uber driver is now between $1,100 and $1,200 a month. You stretch that out over the full 6 years of the loan, and you're looking at somewhere between $84,000 and $88,000 in payments, insurance, gas, and maintenance. And here's the kicker. After 6 years of heavy Uber driving, that car is beaten up, worn down, and practically worthless. You won't even recover your original $10,000 down payment. And sometimes it gets worse. In this driver's case, his car didn't even last 6 years. It died with years of payments still owed. And that's a nightmare scenario, paying off a dead car while scrambling to keep earning. So when he looked at his balance sheet, what he saw was totally sobering. Long days on the road, high operating costs, and after everything was accounted for, he barely broke even. And that's when he tried something totally different. Instead of owning a car, he rented an electric vehicle, an EV. At first glance, this might sound more expensive. After all, renting is usually thought of as a premium option. But here's how it played out. The cost of the EV rental was about $50 a day. Charging the car cost another $15 a day. That's a total of $65 daily to get a brand new car on the road with a full charge that carried him 300 to 400 miles a day. Insurance covered in the rental. Maintenance repairs also included. So instead of juggling all the unpredictable costs of ownership, you have one simple predictable number, $65 a day. Now here's where it gets real interesting. Let's break down his math. On a typical day, he would gross between $250 and $300 a day. On a really good day, especially when he snagged multiple airport runs, he could make up to $400. You subtract his $65 in rental costs, and he was netting between $185 and $350 a day. Now, compared to owning, the daily numbers don't necessarily look cheaper, but that's not the entire point. When you own a car, you're locked into a 6-year loan tied to the maintenance and carrying the risk that that car may not even last the life of the loan. Renting flipped the equation. Even if the daily cost was a bit higher, he could walk away anytime he wanted. So he could drive 3 days a week, 1 week a month, or take the whole summer off. That freedom and optionality turned Uber driving from a rigid grind into a side hustle that actually fit his retirement lifestyle. Now, you might be wondering, wait a minute, is this even allowed? Can you really drive an Uber with a rental car? The answer is yes, but there's an important detail. Uber only permits rentals from their approved partners. These partners handle the insurance, they meet Uber's vehicle standards, and they streamline the approval process so drivers don't have to re-register a new car every time they rent. And Uber itself has its own rental program. So as long as the car comes from an authorized partner, it's fully within Uber's terms of service. So this isn't some loophole or gray area. It's actually a legitimate path that's supported by Uber. So what makes this rental strategy so powerful? It's not just the daily math. It's the flexibility. When you buy that car, you're locked in for the long term. You have that 6-year loan. You've tied up $10,000 as a down payment. You're on the hook for repairs, insurance, and the risk that the car dies before the loan is even paid off. Even if you quit driving for Uber tomorrow, let's say you don't like it and you just don't want to do it anymore, those payments keep coming and that car is still sitting in your driveway. With a rental, none of that applies. His daily cost is higher, yes, but he always has a new reliable car. If he wants to drive for a few months and then stop, he can walk away with no strings attached. If he wants to drive for a year, he can. And if he wants to take a break for the summer, he can also do that. There's no long-term commitment, no debt, no risk of being stuck with a worthless asset. And he didn't have to tie up $10,000 just to get started. That optionality is a huge advantage, especially for a retiree. Flexibility is freedom. The ability to scale up or scale down without being locked into a financial burden is often worth more than squeezing the last penny out of optimizing the economics. So let's recap the numbers. With ownership, the driver was paying over $1,000 a month, about $1,200 a month actually, just to keep the car on the road, and he was constantly at the risk of a breakdown wiping out his profits. With rentals, his cost was about $65 a day. It was predictable, but more importantly, it was capped. His daily profit after expenses was nearly $200 or more, often close to $1,000 net per week. And he could stop anytime he wanted without penalties or leftover debt. Hey, at this point, I'd love to hear your thoughts. Would you ever consider this type of side hustle in retirement? Or do you think the risk outweigh the rewards? Drop a comment below. I'm curious to hear what you think. All right, let's get back to our Uber driver. So first off, the electric vehicle that he had was cheaper to fuel than a gas car. $15 to charge it for a day versus $400 a month in gas. It was definitely a little bit cheaper for him. Second, the rental car absorbed the cost of insurance and maintenance, which are both major expenses for drivers. Third, the predictability. Knowing exactly what your daily cost will be takes the guesswork out of the hustle. And finally, the flexibility. To me, this is the most important one. The ability to walk away anytime means that you're never locked into a financial trap. And for retirees, this story carries an even bigger lesson. Side hustles aren't about working harder or putting in more hours. They're usually about being structured smarter. It's about finding ways to reduce risk, create flexibility, and make sure the hustle actually pays you for your time. Renting versus owning is one example, but the principle applies across all sorts of areas. Maybe it's using a shared office instead of leasing a long-term office for freelance work. Or maybe it's testing out Airbnb's hosting for a few months instead of rushing to buy an investment property. In all these cases, flexibility and low risk can be more valuable than squeezing out theoretical long-term savings or extra profits. And that's especially true in retirement, where a lot of people, yes, they want to make a little extra money, but oftentimes they're doing something to make a little money, but also get out into the world. So you don't need more financial stress. You don't need more long-term obligations. What you need is the ability to experiment, to try things, and you know what? To walk away if it doesn't fit your life. And that's what this Uber driver figured out for himself and gave me a nice little lesson as well. He stopped thinking of Uber as a grind that barely paid for his car and started thinking of it as a business where his time and energy had to produce real profits, but also give him the extra optionality in his life. Renting an EV was the key to making that shift. So here's my big takeaway. Retirement side hustles aren't about grinding harder, they're about working smarter. They're about using creativity, strategy to turn small opportunities into meaningful income streams. All right, remember the retired CEO who drove the BMW 7 Series? Well, he wasn't driving Uber because he needed the money. He did it for connection and purpose. But now think about the driver I just met on this last vacation. He did need the money, but he discovered a way to earn while keeping his flexibility and his optionality without any of the long-term commitments that could have been a burden to him in his retirement. All right, if you found this story helpful, please don't forget to like and subscribe to The Unretired. We post new videos every week with honest insights on retirement, money, lifestyle, and purpose, so you won't miss the tips that can help you live the life that you want.